Right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's Planning and Environmental Committee. I'd like to start by mentioning some of the, the Chair would like to start the meeting with a following announcement. Welcome to everybody, welcome to members of the public, welcome to those watching on YouTube and in the press. Few housekeeping rules. If a member of the public in attendance needs to use the facilities, they are out through the main entrance as you came in, through the reception opposite Bewitched Coffee. Please note if the fire alarm sounds, you are to make your way out to the nearest fire exit and continue to the assembly point, which is the plaza in front of the multi-storey car park outside of Sam Martin's house. If the alarm is an intermittent sound, this indicates a lockdown situation and attendees should stay in their seats and await further instruction. Can I also remind everyone present to please switch off your phones or put them to silent before we begin. And I remind everybody that this meeting is held in public and is being broadcast live on the Council's YouTube channel, and that the recording will be made available on the website in due course. Please therefore speak clearly and use your microphone. I do have another bit there about public order, but I'm pretty sure we'll do that. Okay. So I'm going to go to item 1, please, and apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies today from Councillor Wayne Fitzgerald and Councillor Jason McNally. Councillor Ryan Ray is here today as Councillor Fitzgerald's substitute.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Ray, for standing. Declarations of interest then. Thank you. Item 3 is declaration to make representation as ward councillor. Okay. Item 4 then relates to the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of February 2025. The committee are asked to approve the minutes. So can I have any comments on that before I go to approve it?
No comment, Chair. I just wanted to propose it.
Okay. Anybody else got any comments on it? No. So Councillor Mood, you are proposing the correct truth?
Yes, that's correct,
Do you
Chair.
have a seconder on that, please? Councillor Antunes, yes? Did you put your hand up? Yeah, Councillor Antunes. So we all agreed? Okay, that's agreed then. Thank you. Item 5 then relates to development control and enforcement matters. Item 5.1 is a confirmation of a TPO on Hollowview, Wittering Road, Barnock. And the report can be found in pages 5 to 28 of your agenda pack. Please can I ask Stephen Chesney-Beals to introduce the item? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We're here today to consider the confirmation of Tree Preservation Order 24-00007. It's a provisional tree preservation order at Hollowview, Wittering Road, Barnock. We're here to consider whether the tree in particular is the subject of the TPO, which is a sycamore, is worthy of a TPO in terms of its public visual amenity value. And is the making of the TPO reasonable and justified having regards to the objections raised. If you can see T1 in the centre of the plan there is the tree in question, which sits in the rear garden of Hollowview, adjacent to the property just to the north, which is Sandals View. The tree is located in the rear garden, as I've just described, in Hollowview, adjacent to the side boundary of neighbouring properties, Sandals View. The tree in question is a sycamore, of early mature specimen, typical of the species, and appears to be in good physiological health, structural condition, with no apparent health problems or structural defects. We've had an objection from the owner of the properties, the owners of the properties at Sandals View, and the main objections relate to the tree dominating the side of the property, blocking out light both from the end of the gable end and also the garden. I accept that the sycamore overhangs the shed at the southeastern end of the bungalow and blocks light from this part of the property to a degree. However, I do not accept that the tree greatly affects the enjoyment of the garden, given its distance and location in relation to the main part of the garden to the rear of the bungalow. The sycamore impacts and will increase in size in the coming years. It's already misshapen and is an eyesore in the property. I do accept the sycamore will increase in size, of course, over the coming years, but the overhang can be managed much the same as it has been in the past. However, I do not agree that the tree is an eyesore. There is a question of the proximity of the tree to the bungalow itself, and there's concerns about the foundation of the property 8 metres away. I do not consider the tree to be close to the bungalow, given the distance in this case. Also, as the objectors are pensioners, there's a concern over the safe access to the dustbin bin storage area adjacent to the gable end of the building, and the fact that the leaves are considered to be oily and fall in and around that end of the property. And if I can show you, this is a view of the sycamore in question from the rear garden of Hollow View. The subject property is behind this tree. This is a view of the tree from public road, Stanford Road, and the view on the left is from Stanford Road, sorry, and on the right from the Wittering Road. Then we have a view across from Bainton Road, and it's the tree on the right rather than the one on the left there that is the subject tree. And then here we have the tree viewed from Sandals View, so it puts it into context in terms of the tree sits in the property just off to the left, which is Hollow View. We're looking at the tree from Sandals View, looking at the gable end of the bungalow on the right there, and behind that fencing is a shed. There is a small tree, as you can see, just beneath and above that panel to the left of the brown garden gate. So that gives you some context as to the location of the tree in relation to the property itself. I accept that the sycamore deposits leaves obviously into the property there, and I accept that, you know, trees and their leaves would have to be managed and periodically removed in order not to cause an issue in terms of health and safety. And then the other point of view is that the tree, sorry, my apologies. The objector has considered that I've failed to consider the rights of the objector in reaching agreement and an offer of replacement of a native tree. But I think, again, the question is, we are losing the sycamore, and it isn't a question of a replacement, as I consider that the tree continues to offer public visual amenity and contribute to the conservation area and the character and the appearance of the Barnack conservation area. As I say, I consider the sycamore has public visual amenity value and contributes to the Barnack conservation area as a skyline feature, and contributes to the tree canopy cover within the area. Hence the decision to protect the tree with a tree preservation order, and I would ask committee then to consider confirming the tree preservation order.
Thank you, Stephen. Okay, committee, we've had a last-minute request for the actual house owner involved in this to speak, Mr. Wright, who's attending today. But because it's last minute, I have to ask committee if you're prepared to allow him to speak. Is that agreed? Good. Okay. In that case, then, Mr. Wright, call you first to come up to the front table. At the bottom, the button at the bottom with looks like a face. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much for allowing me
Right.
to speak.
So, Mr. Wright, before you start, welcome to committee. You'll have 5 minutes from when you begin to address committee, and then stay in your seat. There may be some questions for you. With 30 seconds to go, our Democratic Service Officer will let you know when your time's in here. Okay?
Okay, thank
So
you.
when
very
you're
much.
ready.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. My name is Reginald Wright. I am the owner of Sandals View, and owned it for some 6 years now. The tree in question, which has been discussed, is completely lopsided towards our bungalow, and as a consequence we get over 40% of the drop. It is 2 meters from my property, and I would like to remove the tree and replace it with a British tree, primarily because the overhang is causing huge problems towards the water, especially to my wife and myself, in keeping that area safe for us to get to our bins. I don't agree with the statement that it's an amenity, because people don't believe people see it when they walk past, drive past, and as a consequence I think the benefits to the 2 bungalows far outweigh comments that the tree officer has made. If there's anybody else got any question, I'm more than happy to answer.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wright. Any questions at all, Mr. Wright? Yes, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. I'm not sure if it's relevant, but is that gate going towards your to your back garden? Is that going to the...
Yes, it is.
Right. All right. Thanks for that. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Anybody else? Could I just ask you, please? Sorry, I'll come back to it. Could I just ask you, Mr. Wright? You mentioned to both properties. What's you're speaking on behalf of another property? What property is that particularly? Is that Olive View?
Yes.
And you say there's a benefit to them?
Well, they tried to get it removed a number of years ago, primarily because the previous owners of Sandals View, there was an exchange of letters bordering on solicitors regarding that tree. Mrs. Chappell, the owner, objected to the amount of leaves that were dropping on her property. She went about it the wrong way. Rather than discussing with them, she started to issue letters which upset the couple. I'd like to think I've gone about it in a...
If you could just clarify what's the benefit to the other property.
Oh, sorry. I believe it would be wrong of me to state that Mr. Hunt said this, because he didn't. I believe it's a benefit to both parties, based on my problems.
Okay, thanks. That's fine. I just wanted to clarify. Councillor Skipston.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask, was the tree in position when you bought your property, and did you have the same thoughts about it at that time?
I don't think it came into being considered. I think one never does until you've lived in it for a year to find out the quirkinesses.
Thank you, Chair. You said that if you cut the tree down, you would be prepared to replace it.
Yes.
Where would you replace the tree that? What are you saying?
2 meters towards the landowner's home. We couldn't put it in the exact same space because the rootage. That rootage could be took off, of course, if that was an issue.
So if you planted a new tree, would the leaves of that tree, when in come autumn time, will they fall into your garden?
I don't believe the silver birch would be anywhere near as problematic as what this sycamore is.
Got another question for you, Mr. Wright, if that's all right. And I've forgotten it. Yes, got it. So I was thinking of something else. Sorry. Do you then, therefore, disagree with the officer, the tree officer, that pruning it in the normal way, which you can do if you apply on a TPO in a proper managed way, that's not possible? So in other words, you can you can apply to prune to a certain standard that which, as long as the council are happy with, you can do that. Is that not possible? Is that not something that could be done?
Bearing in mind 40% overhangs my property at the moment, if that was pruned off, I think it would be greatly unsightly. We did consider this to start with, and when I spoke to a tree surgeon, he said, yes, in theory you can take it down, prune it, or whatever you want to call it, lob it. But he didn't want to have anything to do with it because professionally it would bring into question his standards. To take 40% off that tree would be frightening.
Yeah, probably. We're probably right at different angles. You're probably thinking just go to your fence line.
Yes.
I'm thinking just managing the tree, the ones that come over, rather than just just crop it at my fence line, which I agree would be a massive cut.
Yes. I'd have to look at it because I don't want to go down the route of trying to appease everybody and then still be left with the same problem 5 years down the line.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for responding. Anybody else? No? Okay, thank you, Mr. Wright. Thank you very much for your time. You can return to the public gallery. Could you just turn that mic off for me? Press that bottom button again. That's great. Thank you. Okay, then, so we move committee to questions to officer or officers. To Stephen. Any questions? Councillor Rush.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, Stephen, could you just confirm that if that tree is very unsightly, very lopsided, if the remaining part of that tree was pruned or cut back, can you just confirm that it wouldn't damage the rest of the tree, please?
Through you, Chair. Certainly, Councillor. The tree has been pruned in the past on the property side. And yes, the tree could be reduced and reshaped, but it wouldn't be acceptable to do a 40% reduction, because again, that would be unacceptable in our borocultural terms. But certainly the tree can be pruned to reduce the nuisance that the property owner is and the objector is experiencing.
Any further questions? No? Okay, thanks. Right, we move then to debate then. So who would like to start debate on that item? Donald Rush. Okay, I'll start it then. I can understand where Mr. Wright is coming from the point of view of the nuisance factor, as he would describe it, and his wife. Conversely, from the officer's point of view, the way I look at it, it's a perfectly healthy, lovely tree. It's up to the, I suppose, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, whether or not those that went on the site visit or that can see the photos in front of them think that a tree is worthy in that conservation area of protection. You can see the pictures flying through now. Whether or not you can see it really is, again, well, you can if you're looking in the right direction, so it's a difficult one. It's not on the roadside, it is in the middle of an area. But my personal view is it's a lovely tree. I think it can be managed. I believe the officer that can be managed under a TPO, and for that reason, at this point in the debate, I will be supporting officer's decision. Thank you. Councillor Rush.
Yes, I agree with you, Chair. I think it is unsightly at the moment, but having asked the question of the tree officer if it could be cut back, I think it could be cut back to make it more presentable. So at this present time, I will be going with preserving and having the TPO put on, please. Thank you.
Councillor Skibstead.
Yeah, I also agree with your comments, Chair, that were made by the tree officer. I don't consider really any tree to be an eyesore. I think it's a very beautiful tree, and I agree that it could be managed in that way that's been outlined. So I would at this point also be voting to keep the TPO. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ramsey.
Thank you, Chair. Having visited the site, I was initially thinking that whether it's having an impact on the light or it's too near to the windows or so, considering that it's on the side of the house, and also having visited various points to see whether it is it comes within the public view or not. I happen to disagree with the owner that it does to an extent, as we have seen it while we were on the visits. Had it been having an impact on the windows or light, then I probably would have been minded to, yes, not to go along with the officer's recommendation. But in this case, regretfully, I would have to go with the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Ramsey. Anybody else wanting to? Yes, Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to join the site visit due to being a last-minute substitution, but going from the information that's been presented to us, the information in the papers, I'm afraid I've got to agree with the officer. I'd like to say, obviously, any of the things mentioned about future risks to foundations, to subsidence, to further growth impacting anything further, whether it's light levels, whether it's fall in the garden, obviously that's worth engaging with officers as and when that happens and as that evidence produces. But for the time being, I'm minded to side with the officer's comments.
Thank you, Councillor Ray. Anybody else to enter into the debate or offer an opinion? Offer an alternative opinion? Perhaps? No? Okay. If there's no more debate, then I'm looking for a proposal, please. Councillor Rush.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to recommend confirmation of the tree preservation order 24-00007 TPO without modifications. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rush. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Skipstead? You want a second? Yes. Joy is supposed to second.
Yes, I'll second it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I would. Okay, so we have a proposal and it's been seconded, so it's perfectly correct. So we'll go to the vote. Can I remind you please to use the cards on your table, red for against, green for and yellow for abstention. So all those in favour of the proposal that's been put before you. So that decision is unanimous and the TPA will be applied accordingly. Thank you very much. Thank you, Stephen, if you need to go. Thank you. Sorry, I lost my page. Item 5.2 then relates to Castor Church of England Primary School on Stocks Hill in Castor. The report can be found on pages 29 to 40 of your agendas. And is it yourself that's going to do it? I've got Karen here. So in this case, it isn't Karen, it is Phil that is going to present. So when you're ready, Phil. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is an application for a replacement building at the Castor Church of England Primary School. It's a replacement of a mobile classroom with a modular building of similar scale, slightly bigger. And this is what's known as a Reg 3 application. So similar to the last committee, it's an application being made by the council as education authority. We, as well, yourselves as the committee, are only tasked with determining whether or not this is acceptable in planning terms. So this is the location plan. Red site outline shows the location of the classroom and also the way in which the entrance to the school where the classroom would be delivered to the site. The blue lines represent the extent of the school land itself. And on the right, there's an aerial photograph showing the school buildings and associated playgrounds, playing fields, etc. To the north of the site, there's the parish church and associated burial ground, and the site is pretty much in the centre of the village. This is the block plan, which shows in a bit more detail the location of the proposed classroom. So where my cursor is, that's the footprint of the proposed building. As I said before, more or less on the same site as the existing mobile classroom. At the top, there's two photographs there of the entrance gates, which part of the proposal is to temporarily remove the gate and part of the wall to enable the modular building to be delivered to the site. That would then be reinstated to exactly the same spec as it is. Some photographs from various points around the site. The top left photograph is looking more or less eastwards across the school playground, and it's the building in the middle is the existing classroom, which will be removed and replaced. The photograph on the bottom left of the screen, that's looking north eastwards. As you can see, the church is very prominent in that view, and the existing classroom on the right hand side. Some more photographs, this time looking from a bit closer to the church, across the playground and the burial ground towards the existing building, which will be replaced. And again, some further photographs showing from different angles. As you can see, the building is amongst the other existing school buildings. Now, these are some drawings or some plans and elevations of the proposed classroom. It will be a sort of cream exterior, slightly bigger than the existing building, slightly different fenestration. There's more windows, and it's a little bit more broken up, if you like, than the current classroom. The plan at the bottom shows that it's divided into two classrooms. Now, these elevations show the existing classroom and the proposed classroom, so you can see the similarities and the differences. The top ones are the existing, bottom ones are proposed. As you can see, similar in height, almost the same in width, but slightly longer in length, and you can see the different fenestration as well. These are some more contextual elevations showing it from the opposite direction. Very briefly, these are the relevant policies. This is policy CH1 from the Castor Neighbourhood Plan, and in summary, what it requires is for new buildings to take account of local distinctiveness, take account of views towards the church. The map on the right shows key views towards the church. Now, they're mostly outside of the village looking in, but that's not to say that closer views aren't also important. The policy also requires that the village design statement be taken into account. There is a degree of flexibility in this policy, as it does allow sort of slight deviations from what would be ideal if there's sufficient justification. Another two important policies from the neighbourhood plan. The top one there, CLU4, that's to do with archaeology. The reason why we've talked about that is because the site is very sensitive in heritage terms, in that it's part of an ancient monument, the Roman site. The policy obviously seeks to make sure such sites are adequately protected. Policy CS3 at the bottom there, that relates to education, and that's supportive of new educational development within the village. And then this is the Castor Village section of the design and of development in selected villages, SPD, which we have, and won't go through all of those there, but it's all about making sure new developments are locally distinctive, wherever possible use locally distinctive materials, generally be in keeping with the character of the place. Key issues in terms of the principle of development, well, it's a development, educational development within the village envelope, so the principle is accepted. Heritage, as mentioned, it's part of a scheduled monument. It's also sensitive because you've got the Grade 1 listed church very close, there's other listed buildings nearby. It's also within a conservation area, so there's various levels of heritage there to take into account. There would be a low level of less than substantial harm. Our conservation officers have clarified it will be at the lowest end of that spectrum. The local plan policy and the NPPF dictates that less than substantial harm should be weighed against public benefits. And in this case, there is a significant public benefit of it being an educational building and the benefits that brings. So in that sense, it's considered to be acceptable. Temporary or permanent permission, the reason why I put that in, that's essentially the reason why it's been referred to committee by Castor Parish Council. They referred it on the grounds that it should go to committee if officers weren't proposing to make it a temporary permission. We've looked into this and it's explained in great detail in the report, but very briefly, the applicant is essentially looking for a permanent permission. Although it's a modular building, it's essentially a permanent structure. It's got quite a long lifespan, some 50 years or so, and that's what the applicant intends it to be, a permanent structure to be used for potentially that length of time. And on those grounds, it's not considered to be necessary to put a temporary permission on there. And then just finally, highways, there's a condition requiring a construction management plan. That's just to make sure that there's no highway safety issues caused by delivery of the building, mud on the road, that kind of thing. So finally then the recommendation is to approve subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Phil. We have one person registered to speak, Rachel Huns. Is she here? Did you want to come to the front? Because obviously you won't be able to answer them from there. Okay. So, just to confirm, Rachel, when you press your mic in a minute, you're just here to answer questions. You're not actually going to present anything. Press the mic. Sorry. No. So can you just answer again so as it's for the record?
Yeah, so I'm here to answer any questions in relation to the planning application.
Okay, fine. That's it. Okay, that was a quick 5 minutes. Okay, questions, members, at all for Rachel Hunt? Councillor Rush.
Thank you, Chair. Rachel, could you tell us what the difference in size is between the classrooms that are there now and the proposal, please?
Yeah, so there is a small increase. It goes from a 5-module building to a 6-module building in terms of the modules. I don't know what that is in terms of meters.
Can I bring Phil in? He can answer that question for you. Is that okay, Phil?
So the existing building measures 135 square metres. The proposed replacement building is 166 square metres, approximately.
Okay. Good. Any other questions at all? Yes, Councillor Skibsted.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Just to ask, would there be, or can you say what the difference in cost would be if you were to erect a building that was more in keeping with what the parish council would like compared to what you're suggesting here? Can you sort of say anything about that price difference?
So are you, in terms of what, I don't know what the parish council would like, but in terms of what we've proposed, the planning have already come back with some alterations to ensure that it's in keeping with the area, and we've already agreed those alterations.
I think they were saying they wanted something timber clad, from what I can see. So would that be much more expensive?
That is significantly more expensive.
Significantly.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Rachel, could I just ask you, if you know, I'm going to ask officers, if not, how many years has a mobile classroom been on that site? Can you confirm?
I don't know the full, because obviously I've not been here that long, but from what I can understand is that unit itself is around 30 plus years old, and I believe it's been there a good 20 plus years. So
there's been something on the site for about 30 years.
Yeah.
Not that particular unit.
Not
I'm
that
not going into
particular
that.
unit, no. That
I'll
particular
clarify it with
is
officers.
second
All right.
hand, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Just
Yeah.
asking the question.
Sorry, Chair, just to
Yes,
add to that,
Councillor Mood.
it is, if you look at the, it says since 2002, they've had some sort of mobile unit there. To just,
Thank you.
So it's been there for 24 years.
Yeah, it wasn't. I didn't know. I just wanted it put out in the public domain. I think it's a lot longer than that, but we'll get officers to confirm it. Yeah. Anybody else want any questions? Yes, Councillor Antoons.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. I see the height of this unit is 3.4 metres. Do we know what the height of the existing unit is? And the second question is on the noise of, or potential noise of, air conditioning or heat pumps. It looks like the intent or the forecast is it will not be more than the background noise. But is there any way of assessing that or determining the type of equipment that goes in there to ensure that that is the case?
There is currently equipment, air conditioning units in there. So there is currently air conditioning units within the existing premises. So that's why they're saying that it would be no more than the current background noise, because nothing will be altering.
Do you know that?
No, I can get the.
Can you
do
give
you
us
have
that?
that information?
Or should we come back to you for that in a minute? We'll come back to that as a question for officers, if that's okay. Do you want that clarifying, Councillor Ray?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, the current unit is a 5-bay, has one classroom. The new one is going to be 6-bay with 2 classrooms. That's adding an extra 3 metres, so presumably these are going to be 2 much smaller classrooms than the current one, which seems like a fair size at 15 metres wide.
The existing unit is 2 classrooms.
So it's already 2, it will just be 2 larger.
Yeah, the difference is the toilet provision that we now need to increase to meet the current standard, today's standards.
Thank you.
Oh, that's an interesting point. Thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Rachel, for your time. Would you like to just turn your mic off for me? Okay, so we'll go to questions for officers. Councillor Antoons, your question again, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I see the height in here in the application is 3.4, and just from the drawings, you say it's marginally higher than the existing. It looked about 50% higher. I just wanted to get a sort of feel, having been to the site visit, I just wanted to get a feel how much higher, relative terms.
Through your Chair.
Yep.
So the existing building is 3.4 metres in height, and the proposed building is between 3.6 and 3.75 metres in height. There's a slightly sloping roof, that's why it's between one and the other. So we're talking that much taller.
Okay. Councillor Rush.
Thank you, Chair. I see in 2016 there was a planning application for a 5-bay mobile providing 2 classroom storage and toilet facilities, and that was permitted. To me, this seems just to be replacing a old building with a new one. Why do we have to have a planning permission for it?
It needs planning permission because it's a new building, a new development.
Okay, I'll just come in at that point. Can you confirm, as far as you know, how many years there's been a mobile classroom on the site in this position or similar position?
So the first planning record we have is from 1999 for a mobile classroom. That permission was extended a number of times, and then there was another planning permission in 2016 for a replacement mobile, and again that was extended. but we don't know whether anything was there before 90 or how long before 1999, because that was a retrospective application. So it could
so
be
around about 24 years you know of.
26 years, as
26.
far as we're aware. Could be longer.
Okay. All right. That's close enough. I won't split hairs over a few years. Just wanted to know on that point. Okay. Fine. Any other questions for officers, please, on this one? One other one I'd just like to clarify is that the officers that obviously they've made their comments, they're all happy with the effect. Obviously, you said less than substantial, so they're all happy with the finish, the materials, the sighting, the colours.
Yes, there were some changes made to the design throughout the application process, suggested by our conservation team. Slight changes to the colour, some of the details to reduce the impact. The result, I mean, it was already deemed to be of a low level of harm, but this further reduces any level of harm.
And if I could just clarify one point, the reason this is before us is because the parish council would rather it be temporary than permanent. Is that the only one reason it's been called to before us?
Yes, that's correct, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? No, should we go to debate then? Who would like to start that off? Councillor Mahmood.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Yeah, no, I think I'm of the view that I feel it should be a permanent fixture rather than keep coming back and forth to us, and it seems to be a very acceptable application. So in this current moment in time, I don't have no objections.
Thank you, Councillor Mahmood. Anybody else? Councillor Rush.
Thank you, Chair. I think considering this has been there for at least 26 years, and the last time I went to was 2016, I'm sure that I wasn't able to be at the site visit on Friday, but I think because of the meanness of the children, what we need to think of as well, I'm happy with the proposal to replace it, so I will be going with the officer's recommendation to grant this application.
Thank you, Councillor Rush. Anybody else? Councillor Warren.
I'm kind of in a similar mindset with the other councillors. I am willing to go with the officer's recommendation.
Sorry, Councillor, I can hear you, but I need to have the mic on. Sorry. So make sure everybody does. Sorry to stop you mid-flow.
This should be on.
No, it's not.
It's just the lights broke.
Just the lights broke, that's all.
The lights at the bottom are showing that.
I'll crack on then. So
Yeah.
I was asked, yeah.
But yeah, so I say that I'm with the officer's recommendation, looking at this plan. Obviously, I've looked at the appearance, the character, and the low level of harm impact that this application will create. So I'll go with the officer's recommendation and approve this application.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Councillor Antunes.
Thank you, Chair. I think, yes, it's been there for 26 years. I think this will probably be an improvement. The only thing I would make comment on is just confirmation that any noise from the air conditioning heat pump systems are no greater than the background ambient noise levels. I think, is it 33 decibels, whatever it is that has been noted on the Splash Lane report. That would ensure that the residents adjacent are not impacted by additional noise. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Antunes. There is quite a bit of condition to this one, which does mean that that level of noise is conditioned, and also that the hours of use for that reason, because I think it's pretty much right. If I can't really ask him a question, he might nod. Feel that it would probably be at night if the air conditioning was running, that it could breach, but because the hours of opening wouldn't be at night, it's okay pollution-wise.
Yeah, that's correct.
Nods accordingly. Is that quite right? So it is in there, so you're right. Brilliant. Yes, Councillor Skipstead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also minded to go with the officer's recommendation because it's important that the school has a suitable building for the children, and this seems to be of great importance, and it's not changing the character from what it was before in any in any significant way. So yes, I'll be minded to vote to approve this application. Thank you.
Anyone else want to speak? No? Okay, I'll just finish off. I'm not going to push the points too much. I think they've all been made. Yes, of course, there was the reason I asked the question is because I was trying to get my head around why it should be temporary and not permanent, which is the parish council's thing or concern, and why they brought it here. And that 26 years in one place, less than substantial level of harm, weighed against public benefits, education is extremely strong benefit. And obviously, as we said, it doesn't meet standards what they've got, so they need to up the standard. Conditions have covered just about everything. I think again, I can only push site visits. You went on a site visit, you could see what was effectively was there, be a little bit bigger, a little bit longer. So I don't see any reason why we shouldn't approve this application. So I will be going with officer's recommendation. Anybody else? No. Should we go for a proposal then? Anybody want to put a proposal forward? Councillor Mood for your proposal, please.
Thank you, Chair. I propose that we go with our recommendations and grant approval.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Warren, in a second.
Happy to second that recommendation.
Thank you. Okay, again, we have a proper proposal and it's been seconded, so we'll go to the vote. Please remember to use your cards. All those in favour of the proposal? So that is, yeah, unanimous, so the application is approved. Thank you very much. Right, this is quite unusual for me, but the next one I think might be a bit bigger than we thought. I hope it is. So if anybody needs a toilet break, would you like one now or do we carry on? Quite early in the debate, but this could go on for a little while. So you all right to carry on? Right, we'll crack on then. Obviously, if somebody's desperate, by all means, shout. Item 6 then. We'll just let them set up, but it will relate to the draft local plan. The report, as you've probably gathered, goes from 41 to 238 in your document, so it's a big document. And once she's ready, Gemma Wildman will introduce the item to you. So just before you start, yes, Councillor Rush.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask a question to the legal officer. If we make a if we make a mention of a particular site in this local plan, will it be determined that we have made a predetermined decision when if it comes back to planning committee in the future? Also, if there's a site in this local plan that's been in there before, and if a councillor has objected to it in previous years, will that be classed that we have made a determined decision as well?
Thank you, Chair. Through you. So we're not making a determination today on the local plan. Really, this is about noting the local plan and making any comments that members might have. Now, at this stage, some of the comments might be general comments, some of them might be more specific, but at the moment, it's just looking at allocations and policies in the local plan. So any comments that you might make are unlikely to predetermine any subsequent application that may come forward in the future. I think in particular, if we're looking at if in the future a site is allocated in the local plan and an application is submitted, it will be with much more detail than you would have in a local plan. If there are any comments that are clear that you might have predetermined an application, such as over my dead body, will this ever come in front of us? I'll ever approve this? That may well be a predetermination, but it's unlikely at this stage because we do not have all the detail. It will simply be an allocation on a plan rather than when it comes before you to make a determination as a Development Control Committee, it will have much more detail and be an outline application with some detail submitted at the same time. So it won't be a predetermination.
So let's say, just a scenario that there's going to be a housing estate out there, And I was to say on, say, social media, I'm totally against that, them houses being built on there, and that site is in the local plan. Will I be classed as being made a predetermined decision, and I would not be able to sit on the planning committee in the future?
So if you made a public statement to the effect that you do, again, the colloquial over my dead body, it would be an indication that you had predetermined any future planning application. What we're looking at today is any comments that members might have on the whole of the new draft local plan, which members, obviously it's up to members what comments you want to put forward, but it's unlikely to be in that greater detail today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for answering the question. Emma, gave you time to get ready. Over to you.
Right, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Like I said, I'm here today to talk about the proposed new draft local plan. A bit closer, sorry, that's right. Yeah, sorry, yeah. We're here to talk about the proposed draft local plan. As has already been mentioned, but just as a reminder, so Planning Environment Protection Committee is recommended to comment on the draft local plan before it is submitted to Cabinet on Thursday for approval for the purpose of public consultation, which will take place in April and May 2025. So I'd just like to start with a quick reminder and a bit background to the process. So as you're all aware of being on Planning Committee, the current local plan was adopted in July 2019, and that sets the growth targets to 2036. This is what's used when determining planning applications. The local plan is now more than 5 years old, and therefore the national policy is required to be reviewed. Since the local plan was adopted, there's been several changes to national policy and guidance, some fairly recently as well. There's been quite a lot of new legislation, such as the introduction of biodiversity net gain and increased requirements for climate change. There's also been a new government setting a new agenda and growth ambitions, and also the introduction of new mandatory housing targets. So there's quite a lot of things that will need to be reviewed and updated for the local plan. So this slide here sets out the timetable. This is the revised timetable known as the Local Development Scheme that was updated in February. And it sets out the statutory stages involved in preparing a local plan, and the local plan has to be prepared in accordance with these stages. Preparing a local plan is quite a lengthy process. There's 3 stages of public consultation. The first stage, we carried out the issues and options consultation last summer, or summer 2023. And at that stage, it was just asking people's views, what they would like to see in the new plan, and then trying to understand what people's ambitions were, or what their sort of requirements were, and their priorities for the future growth of Peterborough. We're now at the second stage of public consultation, which is on the draft plan, and this is the first time that the plan will include proposed policies and proposed sites, and the first opportunity for people to make comments on those. So if the local plan is approved by Cabinet, this will then go out for public consultation, and it will last for 7 weeks. Once the public consultation has completed, the planning policy team will review all comments, and we'll look and decide what changes and any recommendations that need to be made and changes to the plan. Then the council will publish the proposed submission version, and this will be the version that the council would like to see adopted as the local plan. That will then go out for a further round of public consultation. Once the consultation is completed, at this stage all the comments will be processed by the planning policy team, but at that stage it's not up to the council to decide how to deal with those comments. The draft, the plan, all the evidence base and all the comments are submitted to central government, who then appoint an independent planning inspector to carry out an examination. And the inspector will review all the evidence, all the comments, and carry out an independent examination. And anybody with any outstanding objections, I was able to attend that meeting and put their cases to the planning inspector. The planning inspector will then review all that, issue a report which will have recommendations to ensure that the sound plan is approved. And what the recommendations the inspector makes have to be taken into account in the plan, and that version is then put to the council, to full council, for it to be adopted, and it's only at that point that it becomes the development plan for Peterborough and is then used in determining planning applications. The current timetable estimates that is to be December 2026, but it's important to note that from the date that the council submits the plan to government, that part of the timetable is out of the hands of the council. It's then up to the planning inspector. So these are estimated dates at this stage. So I just wanted to provide you all with a bit of background of the process, and so it is quite a lengthy process and there's several stages left to go. So as a quick background for you, we carried out the issues and options consultation, as I mentioned. We had good response rate with lots of people setting out their views and what could be included in the new plan. We also carried out a call for sites, and 148 sites were suggested. We reviewed all the comments that have been submitted to us, and a key issues report was published in November 2023, providing a summary of what those comments said. And work has been carrying out on background and to prepare the draft local plan. So I think for Planning Committee, it's important at this stage just to set out what the status is of the draft local plan. As you're aware, planning applications must be determined in accordance with the development plan, unless material consideration indicates otherwise. So national policy is quite clear at paragraph 49 that councils can give weight to relevant policies in emerging plans according to the stage in the preparation of the emerging plan, which, as in the previous timetable, you can see this is still quite an early stage, the extent to which there are unresolved objections to relevant policies, and at this moment in time, it hasn't been out for consultation. Once the plan's been through public consultation, there'll be a better understanding of where there's unresolved objections. And as the plan progresses through the different consultation stages, more information and more weight can be added. And then also it's the degree of consistency to the NPPF and other relevant policies. So because this is still quite an early stage, the weight that can be attached to this at any planning application is likely to be limited. And that is set out in the plan to make that clear to anybody and decision makers what the status is. So I'd just like to talk a bit more of background about some of the numbers and information about the plan. So the new government introduced mandatory housing targets in the summer, or their intention to introduce mandatory housing targets. So work began preparing a local plan, and the current method set a requirement for 936 homes per year, and that was the work that was undertaken last year. The government issued their consultation, and that increased our figure by 132 dwellings to 1,068. And so work on the local plan was paused to allow us, or consultation on the local plan was paused to allow us to review all the different sites. When the new NPPF came out just before Christmas, even though the Peterborough's target increased, it didn't increase as much as we were expecting. So the new mandatory housing target for Peterborough is currently 1,006 dwellings per year. That gives a total minimum target over the plan period, 20,120 dwellings. So you can see how that's changed and why there's been some delay in the process. And there's a note at the bottom of this slide just to inform you some background information. Our current local plan's target is 982 dwellings per year, so you can see it's fairly close to that. And also, on average, since the base date of the current local plan to the 31st of March 2024, on average, the delivery rate has been 1,010 dwellings per year. So again, this target is very consistent with what's being delivered, and I think it's a realistic and deliverable target. So the draft local plan, as of the current local plan, will include a number of different policies on many different topic areas. The Cabinet report does include a very brief summary of these different topics, just to outline what each policy contains. I'm not going to go through all of those at this meeting, but I'm just going to quickly highlight some areas where there's been some key changes. Like I mentioned earlier, in terms of climate change, there's quite a lot of change and emphasis on climate change. So there's been some updates to that part of the policy. There's been changes to retail town centres. That's mainly because of the government changing the use class order, and I'm sure in dealing with planning applications you're aware of the change to town centre uses and the new E-class. And natural environment, there's been quite a few changes without those policies because of changes with the Environment Act and the introduction of biodiversity net gain and other green infrastructure requirements. So there's quite a few new policies in that part of the plan. So as I mentioned, as part of the issues and options consultation, we carried out a call for sites and asked local landowners, developers, agents to suggest any sites to us that they thought would be available for development during the life of the 20-year period of this plan. As I said, 148 sites were suggested, and this slide shows you the different areas that were proposed to us. This map was made public following the consultation, so anyone could see what land had been suggested and what would be assessed as part of the process. It was made very clear on the map with a pop-up window that no assessment had been carried out, and these are just sites that have been suggested to us. These lists of sites have been shared with internal council departments such as Transport, Natural Environment, Historic Environment, Education team, to get their feedback and professional input onto the proposed sites. But you can see there's a range of different uses the sites have been suggested to us. So this slide just sets out, as I mentioned before, with a mandatory housing target of 1,006 homes per year. That gives us a minimum requirement for 20,120 dwellings by 2044. Now, that 20,000 homes is quite a high number, but actually at the 31st of March last year, which is our latest monitoring data, of that 9,172 dwellings already had the benefit of planning permission. So those schemes can go ahead. There are a number of existing local plan allocations that have been suggested and can be carried forward, totalling around 4,700. Some of those have almost got planning permission. A good example would be things like at Norwood. So that means that roughly 67% of the growth is already sites that have committed, have got planning permission, or are already in the existing local plan. So the new local plan is looking for around 6,200 new homes to meet our new minimum housing target. So in terms of employment land, we've carried out an employment needs study, and this has identified that there's a need for 2,005 hectares of industrial and land for industrial and warehousing, and 40,000 square metres of office space. Again, the 205 hectares is the total target. There are commitments of approximately 100 hectares. That is sites within the existing urban area, the existing general employment areas, business parks, and also includes a large strategic allocation from previous plans at Red Brick Farm for around 30 hectares. So I thought it'd be worth just going through the background to the site assessment process to make sure you're aware of how this is all, how we've selected the sites and how this will work. So every site is assessed against detailed site assessment criteria. Sorry. And the methodology report was published, which sets out all the different criteria. So every site is assessed and given a colour code showing its level of harm or impact, and where there may be no constraint, or if there's some, whether it can be mitigated against or not. As well as just scoring, there is also professional feedback from internal council departments, as I mentioned, such as the education team, transport, natural environment, historic environment, but also from other statutory consultees such as Natural England and other people like the Environment Agency. But not all the criteria is given the same weight, and that is part of the site assessment process to balance all those different criteria. Some criteria are classed as major, and therefore if a site scores red and doesn't meet one of these major criteria, it's ruled out at the first stage of the process. So these criteria is site availability. Is it actually going to be able to come forward? Whether it's in an area that's safeguarded for future minerals and waste in the adopted minerals and waste plan. Whether it's in flood risk, so whether it's in flood zone 3 for housing, and that has to be more than 50% of the site. If it includes areas that are of hazardous apparatus, so such as gas pipelines that rule that the site can't come forward, and also proximity to nationally important habitats. This plan, there isn't any, but previously sites have been suggested that are actually part of a protected nature area, so they are ruled out straight away. This does mean that quite a lot of land towards the east of the authority is in flood zone, and that does limit the number of developments that can perhaps come forward in some of the villages such as Thorney and Newborough. So this slide is just an extract of the preferred growth sites, and I'll sort of try and talk you through some of those options here. I don't know if you can see, my mouse doesn't work on that screen, so that's not going to help. But it does include growth in the urban area city centre, and that does include a lot of existing allocations. There are the existing urban extensions such as Great Haddon, Hampton, Norwood, East of England Showground, and 2 proposed new settlements, one to the south of Market Deeping and one north of Castor and Aylesworth and north of the A47. There's also development proposed in some of the villages such as Eye, Thorney, and then medium villages at Glinton, Helpston, Barnack, Wittering, and then a small site in the village of Bainton as well. So all sites have been assessed against our growth strategy to try and make sure we find the most suitable, sustainable and deliverable sites. This shows that approximately 19% of the growth is within the urban area of Peterborough, including the city centre. 50% of the growth is within the urban extensions, and they are mostly the urban extensions that some of them have already got planning permission. There's 13% of the growth will be within the identified new settlements, and 6% of the growth will be within villages. The overall spatial strategy does include a windfall allowance of 11%, and windfall sites are sites that are not specifically allocated in the local plan. They're sites perhaps for 1 or 2 dwellings, sort of backland development that may come forward, and there's usually around about 100, just over 100, about 160 homes per year that come forward on average on windfall sites. So that has been factored into the overall strategy to take account of that. So in a bit more detail, you can see that, as I said, 19% of the growth is within the urban area, so over 4,000 dwellings. Over 2,300 of those are committed allocations. There's a number of brownfield regeneration sites in the city centre that are being carried forward, such as the Station Quarter and North Westgate. And within the urban area, there's just over 1,000 new dwellings on unknown sites proposed. For urban extensions, as I've already mentioned, the majority of those are on sites that have got planning permission, are currently under construction and being built. There's 2 existing urban extensions in the local plan, and it does propose additional land at the East of England Showground, part of which has been subject to planning application, and there's additional 570 to the west of the Showground. So there's around 4,000 dwellings on urban extensions. As mentioned, there's 2 new new settlements, one land north of Castor and Aylesworth, which is identified for approximately 1,800 dwellings during the plan period 2044, and 3,000 in total for that site, and also land south of Market Deeping, which is approximately 1,055 dwellings. For the employment sites, many of the sites, as I mentioned, already have planning permission, but the plan includes proposed new allocations, which one of them is a large strategic allocation to the north of Stanground. Then there's other land at Palmwell Way, Morley Way, and other land around near Great Haddon and Hempstead area, and then not Hempstead, Great Haddon and Hampton. And then there's also 7 hectares of employment land as part of the proposed urban extension at Castor and Aylesworth, or new settlement, sorry. So that's just a quick overview of what's in the draft local plan and some of the proposed sites, particularly focusing on the ones that are new to be proposed to this plan. Just as a reminder, this is the timetable I mentioned earlier, and it shows that we're at the second stage of draft public consultation, and it sets out the different stages still to go through and how comments can be made. So if this plan is approved by Cabinet to go out for public consultation, we are preparing different information to help with the public and ensure that people are able to make comments and get their views across as well as possible. So public consultation is currently proposed to take place between the 11th of April to the 29th of May. There'll be people can view the plan, and there'll be the normal PDF version of the plan. So the version that's been attached here is being sent to a designer to be put photographs and a better, more professional layout. There's also an online interactive story map, a summary of the document, which allows people to see a very quick summary of what's in the plan, and they can zoom in on maps and gather more information. And that's for people who don't have to go into the detail, they can look at it that way. There's also a very short summary leaflet that people can look at to get an understanding of what's in the plan. The policies map will also be presented as an interactive map, so people can go onto the link on the website, and they'll be able to zoom into the maps, click, gather more information, and turn on different layers and look what's on the map in their area. And for anybody that would like to view this as a hard copy, there will be a copy available at the Town Hall reception and also copies in local libraries. We'd also like to try and make it as simple as possible for people to make their comments and feedback. So there'll be an online form, and people will also be able to email. There's a form that people can download, and it's important that people make it very clear exactly what part of the plan, what policy or site they're commenting on. And there will be paper copies of the consultation form available in local libraries as well. So that's just a quick presentation of what's about the local plan and what's going to happen next.
Thank you very much, Gemma. Could I call then, please, Martin Chilcott, please, to the front table. Committee, I've exercised my discretion in this case because the local plan is an extremely important document, and I'm allowing 2 members of the public to speak for a maximum of 10 minutes each. Mr. Chilcott being the first, of course. Try the bottom one. Yeah, that one. Okay.
There we go.
Mr. Chilcott, 10 minutes when you're ready.
Lovely. Thank you. I'm Martin Chilcott. I'm chair of Protect Rural Peterborough, which was a campaign group set up in late 2016 when the land at Castor was first put forward after a gap of about 3 decades for mass housing development. I'd like to thank the chair and his discretion for allowing me to do this for 5 minutes. I'm not specifically going to talk in great detail about the site, but I am going to draw your attention to a matter of process, which we think is extremely important. I will touch on the site and how it forms a major part of the plan and puts a risk to the plan. The first point is to say, in terms of process, what you're considering today, there are 3 reports which, to our knowledge, you don't have access to at the moment. And that is the site evidence report, and Gemma very helpfully put up the, I believe, RAG rating of how that's done, so a comparison of those sites and their suitability. The second one is the growth evidence report, which is about how Peterborough should grow, and it would certainly need a very robust economic strategy. And the final one is the local plan sustainability report. And if I just read you out to it, it basically says that this report enables you to consider what is in the draft local plan that's being recommended for consultation. And that sustainability report also covers the options that have been considered, both for policies and for sites. And so there is 3 reports which you don't have. So today you are entirely reliant on what has been presented to you so far and the 182-page draft local plan document which is available. This seems to be a somewhat strange process. The second thing that goes with that, by the way, is that here we are at Planning Committee on Tuesday considering the draft local plan. Cabinet will consider it for recommendation on Thursday morning, but Scrutiny Committee will only get to see it on Thursday evening. So we're not entirely clear what Scrutiny Committee are scrutinising, because by then a Cabinet may have already made it, well, not may, will have made a decision whether it goes forward to draft consultation or not. There are also some issues around whether the initial consultation has been respected. In that consultation, it specifically asked or informed that the government minimum for the plan duration was 2041. But that planners, and I'm quoting, feel that 2044 feels about right, but without any explanation for it. Now, what that effectively does is it adds, on the current figures, 2,012 homes to the overall target. And after repeated requests over the best part of a year, we finally got an explanation of what that justification is, and we don't think it stands up. It's to provide a buffer in case things don't turn out well with the adoption of the plan. The second thing is the 20,000 that was mentioned earlier in terms of target. In the plan, it actually talks about 2,000 more than that. And again, that word buffer is used again in case there is something to consider. So we've got 2 buffers, which effectively add up to about 4,000 homes. Homes England are proposing 3,000 homes at Castor and Aylesworth, again. They're also proposing a country park in the countryside to effectively put, again, a buffer between the existing villages and the development north of the village. It's worth going back to the Freedom of Information request last time round, which said the reason for the country park is to create a single homogeneous settlement of the new development and the existing villages. And nothing that they have said suggests that they have changed their mind on that. In fact, it's very difficult to work out what Homes England are looking for, because we understand they haven't provided a master plan, maybe not at this stage, but even an outline of what number of homes will go where. There's that broad map that just says 5,000 was the original call for sites. So there's nothing specific there. And it's also worth remembering that the Freedom of Information requests we've made this time round, so Homes England, Highways England, and Peterborough City Council came back with it'll take too long and it's commercially sensitive. We've got nothing. So it's opaque. Well, opaque is being generous. Our question for you is, the question to answer, what site viability plans have been provided by Homes England to Peterborough City Council to say that this site is viable? It's constrained by a number of things. Biodiversity, where the mitigation is shown by the Wildlife Trust to say, national organisation, to say that it can't be mitigated. The second thing is archaeological. It's absolutely riddled with archaeological remains from pre-Roman, Roman, Saxon, medieval, and that is a long and tortuous and expensive business to survey it all and conserve it. And the final one is flooding. If you put 3,000 houses on a limestone plateau 25 metres above the village through which the water flows to the River Nene, and then cover that area with 40% of hard surfaces in terms of roads, roofs and everything else that goes with it, where is the water going to go? And therefore the flood management is a major challenge, which is probably why the figure on infrastructure currently being bandied about is £100 million to make this site viable for private developers to develop 3,000. Now, I ask you, bearing in mind the urgent regeneration required for Peterborough, where is £100 million of public money best spent building houses in the middle of the countryside, and no doubt developers will want to develop posh houses, or regenerating the urban and suburban area much needed for Peterborough? The other aspect to it is in terms of the fact that the super fast growth that Peterborough has so-called enjoyed for the last 20 years has not served the people of Peterborough well. We are bottom of the league in terms of health. We are bottom of the league in terms of real increases in household income. We are bottom of the league in aspects of education. And one of the things is we have not had a effective economic strategy. Now, the guidance says that any local plan should have a effective economic strategy. Two things on that. One is economic strategy is only mentioned once in the draft local plan put before you for recommendation. And the second thing is when we challenged officers face to face that the economic strategy recently adopted by Cabinet only about 6-7 months ago, we felt that the vision was weak and vague, and whilst there were some welcome additions and inclusions like John Clare Countryside, a massive opportunity in terms of nature recovery and to reposition Peterborough as a place to be, but apart from that there was a complete lack of sustainability, and the officers didn't challenge our view. They said that'll probably be replaced by something the combined authority comes up with. So are we going to try and prove Einstein's theory of insanity by keep doing the same thing and hope for a different outcome? Because that's what it feels like. It feels like Groundhog Day, to be frank. It's a bit like the Homes of England folks Yes, oh, don't worry, you know, it could be 3,000, but what about if it was in 3 or 4 nice little villages? Yep, that's what you said last time. What about their country park? Well, it's not really neat. It's open countryside. That's where people come to enjoy themselves. Ferry Meadows is full. Yeah, but Thorpe Meadows is being developed. Nean Park Trust owns land to the east now of Peterborough, where more people live who are further away. So why does a country park and why does 100 million quid need to be spent on posh houses in and around Castor and Aylesworth? I would say that in terms of the ask, if you like, is that you do consider whether this draft local plan should be put forward and it is in a state where it can be properly considered for public consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chilcott. Questions from anybody on the committee at all to Mr. Chilcott? Yes, Councillor Antoon.
Thank you, Chair, through you.
Sorry, Councillor Antoon.
Oh, sorry.
Coming to you, you're quick. I'll come to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that very thorough report or statement. You say that this is a very strange process. Can you be more precise about what you mean by that or define that? Thank you.
I think in terms of the fact that as far as we're aware and looking at the basis of it, the Joint Scrutiny Committee's role is to scrutinise what is being put forward. But they're having to do that after the Cabinet has already considered this draft local plan and has made a decision on it. So we're not entirely sure what the Joint Scrutiny Committee are scrutinising on the draft local plan.
Just for clarity, are we unique or unusual in that in respect to other planning authorities and their process?
We're certainly, in terms of the 2 members of the team, and I should just add, by the way, that Protect Rural Peterborough is a team of 28 volunteers, experts in their field in environmental science, ecology, land management, economic planning, planning of housing and commercial development and so forth. And we feel that it is an anomaly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mahmood.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry about that earlier. I just had a question from Martin around the. So you feel that the 6% of growth that has been allocated to villages is too significant? You're saying that there's still the local plan seeks to put too much houses in the villages. Just want to clarify that.
Well, I think the figure of 6% refers to the villages. This is a new settlement, so those are 2 different things. So, for example, I received a post on social media yesterday by a former MP saying, you know, I didn't realise Castor and Aylesworth was closed. There was a full up sign, and I did point out that actually Castor and Aylesworth has grown by 20% over the last 20 years. Which is the same rate as Peterborough. So in fact, the villages do grow, and we recognise the fact that it's important to grow because that helps support things like, a particular favourite of mine is both pubs and a restaurant and a village shop and a coffee house, and it keeps those businesses. And it also brings a life to the community, but not being seen as becoming part of a single homogenous settlement that Homes England envisaged, which involves being part of thousands of houses.
Okay. Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Chair. My question is also on the comments around the process that's being carried out. Now, as you mentioned, Cabinet are being recommended on Thursday to approve this version to be the draft local plan, to then put it out to public consultation. Scrutiny are then being asked to comment on that draft plan. Now, they can't surely do that before it's been made the draft plan. And it's part of that public consultation process that a wide number of councillors, 35, 40, I don't know how many, sit on that, are then commenting on it. What would you propose being the other route or a more normal route, in your words?
I would have thought planning first, scrutiny second, Cabinet third. because unless that it's in that order, the comments that I'm sure that many of them will make, where would they be reflected in this process?
Yeah, if you want to ask another question.
Yeah, and I think that's why we do the public consultation, because this is a draft. That is the point of it. And when we have a draft, that's then when we get people's views. So like you say, it's come to us first, it's here today. Cabinet will then say, yes, this is the draft. This is version 1, if you like, of the approved versions. And then those comments from joint scrutiny, plus the wider public consultation that will take place in that, as we heard from the officer, very long, drawn-out process of consultations and various stages. Hopefully then those comments get brought back in when it comes to Cabinet and goes before the Planning Inspectorate. But that's my understanding of the process. But like you say, I appreciate the thought to put things in beforehand, but we've also had that previous public consultation as well.
Yeah. And in terms of respecting that previous initial consultation, the overwhelming response to that about, for example, the plan end date was 2041. That's what we'll stick with. Yeah, that's what we want. We don't agree with planners who it feels about right that it's 2044. It subsequently, along with the justification that was set out in terms of why it needed to be then, it was actually corrected by planners. The minimum is not 2041, it's March 2042, because of the calendar year which enables a government to say you've done a minimum of at least 15 years. So if it was 2042 versus 2044, that's 2,012 houses at 1,006 a year, and it means that you wouldn't need 1,800 at Castor and Aylesworth. Very simple mathematics.
Any other questions? Councillor Skipstead.
Thank you, Chair. So my question to you would be, I understand your objection to that. Were you talking about regeneration of suburban areas instead? Is that where you would see the money being used more profitably?
I'm just asking the question. You know, 100 million of public money being spent on building, I mean, it'll be a building site for the best part of 15 years, in the middle of open countryside, in the heart of John Clare countryside, the huge nature recovery programme that really can make a difference in terms of not just how Peterborough is perceived, but access to people who live in urban and suburban areas to the countryside. That's part of its rationale. So that seems, it's for councillors to decide, but there's the choice. Do we spend £100 million on something which developers will find quite attractive to build nice posh houses, or is it better spent regenerating Peterborough, which I don't think anybody would disagree with me around this room is desperately needed.
Do you have any particular examples where you think regeneration should be?
I don't think it's for me to say that, to be honest. I think there's plenty of brownfield sites, for example. There are areas where, you know, if you look at something like, actually, I'll give you an example. If you look at the retail stuff up the left-hand side, the west side of Borges Boulevard, you know, by the railway, you know, and that's probably pegged down for some industrial stuff. But wouldn't that bring living back to the heart of the city? And I haven't got it in front of me and I can't tell you chapter and verse on it, but that's the sort of thinking that we need to do more of. I have to say, you know, about a couple of years ago when everything was talked about regeneration and growth, and we all saw a video of Nick Carter and the other bloke jumping around the city, and that video and everything else, you sort of thought, blimey, they've got the hang of this. And it doesn't feel like that's where we are now.
Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Chalker.
Thank you,
very
Councillor Harper.
Okay, I'll now call Mr. Dale McKean. Come to the front when you're ready.
Is it possible to put that single sheet map of all of the sites and focus in on I?
Don't know, but we'll try for you.
Yeah, if you just focus in on I on that would be really good. That's switched on. I'll need to stand, it's going to be easier on my back, I'm sorry.
Okay, Mr. McKean. Obviously, once you start speaking, as you know, I've allowed you 10 minutes, so, and then there'll be questions probably afterwards, okay? All right, no rush.
Chair, if it helps, on the updated version of the planning document, there is a map specifically of I that may help.
That's not going to demonstrate what I'm talking about, I'm afraid. Okay. Okay. So I'll try and. So that is this point here. Down here, further down here, on the edge of Parnwell Way, is an industrial site, proposed industrial site. So the problem we've got is this green area here is a green wedge protecting eye from the urban sprawl. So when you look at where Parnwell Way site is, I'm sorry about this, this is where it is here, right on the edge, not just a little bit, of Parnwell Way. By the way, this site shows you Cardyke, an ancient monument, coming round here, and Cardyke comes round here as well. With regard to this site, which is LP 6231, just there, this is Junction 8. Now, Junction 8 is an absolute nightmare for traffic flow originating from the A47 wanting to go south of Peterborough. And it's just got two small dual lanes going up to Junction 8. If you come down to Junction 8 from the A15, you've got 4 lanes. If you come down to Junction 8 from the Frank Perkins Portway, you've got 4, maybe 5 lanes. If you come round Parnwell Way to Junction 8, you've got 4 lanes. You come down this road from I down to here, you've got just 2. The bus going into the Aldi Centre has been stopped. Why was it stopped? Because it took them 20 minutes to go into the Aldi shopping centre and get back out again because of all the traffic rat run problems coming down the A1139. So what's needed at the A1139 is 4 lanes approaching the Junction 8 of Frank Perkins Parkway. You put this site on here, you can't have those 4 lanes because they come into that site. Now I'll go back to Green Wedge. Green Wedge protects I, and that site is just here, but what about these roads? The policy of Green Wedge, LP 44, in this plan says you can have infrastructure and roads on the Green Wedge. This site again is in flood zones. We heard about flood zones earlier on. This is flood zone 3, this is flood zone 2, sorry. This is flood zone 3. Other way around, flood zone 3, flood zone 2. And Cardyke comes around here, and anybody who goes into the Aldi site will know how it floods on the entrance of the Aldi site. We're proposing to put a massive great industrial site in a flood zone on a green wedge. Where's the test, the sensitivity sequential test for flood zones on this site? Where else in Peterborough can they have these industrial sites? Why are they plonking it into this flood zone and green wedge of I? So that's the industrial site there. This is a photograph of the approach to the Grade 2 listed Oxney Grange, Grade 2...
I'm sorry to stop you, Mr McKean, but is that in our report? Because you can't be bringing photos
yes,
to committee.
I'm going to show you the information.
No, is it in my report? You can't just bring
Not from the
photos
office,
to
no.
committee. You can't bring photos because we've not had a chance to look at it properly.
Okay.
I'm right in that, aren't I? Because I am right. I'm just going to check for legal here. If that wasn't in the first report, how is that fair then to bring photos?
It's my
to committee?
photograph to try and demonstrate.
Yeah, but
the
you have
issue.
to put that into committee to look at before the meeting. You can't just bring photos and maps.
I can't do it.
Because that's got to go around this room.
Yes.
To have a good look at
That's
it.
fine, yeah.
Are you with me?
I'm thinking about it in 10 minutes. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So you have got on that plan this site here. This site here is right opposite Oxney Grange, the Grade 2 listed Monastery Grange that was linked back to Peterborough Cathedral. It's an incredibly important site. Opposite that site at the moment, coming to your committee, I hope, is the current industrial application that they're going to put in. That site that's about to come to you is 15 metres high. It's that high of this roof. And it is just across the road from Oxney Grange. There's the 15 metre high on that wall. There's Oxney Grange there. That's how far away it is. And this new site is going to do exactly the same. It's going to just be right across the road from Oxney Grange. This site is for B2 and B8. B2 low-level industry, B8 15 metre high industry. This site is the same size as Tesco's. We've got tremendous noise issues and pollution issues from the Tesco site, and you want to put that site, not you, the developers want to put that site and the new site, which is in this plan, that far away from Oxney Grange. And that site is GEA7 Oxney. That's just the signs of these plans. So while I'm talking about grade 2 listed buildings, inside the village, right next to the Blue Boar, and some of you may have been there, pub is a site for 10 houses squeezing into the small, sensitive area right next to the grade 2 listed Blue Boar and our conservation area, and opposite grade 2 building over the road, which is a thatched cottage, one of only 2 left in the village. But critically, they want to put 10 houses in this. If you accept that, it'll be indicative numbers, which means it could be even more. We need a policy for these type of sites, these sensitive sites, which says, like we do with other sites, that should be a maximum of 6, and it needs to be sensitive to the grade 2 listed building and conservation area it's in. So this needs a policy specifically to protect it and the conservation area. Back to a grade 2 plus listed a bit again. This is the site in LP 56.5 for 100 houses right next to Northern Farm on Crowland Road, a grade 2 star listed building and curtilage. Again, it should be a specific policy. Is 100 enough? Too many? I don't know. But somebody in conservation ought to say it's grade 2 star, it needs to be in keeping and a sensitive development, and the maximum should, not indicative 100, but the maximum should be 60 or 80 or whatever it is. So again, a grade 2 star listed building in I having a unreasonable, unsensitive development into it. And I'll just finish on I growth. This brings the future housing that these sites are bringing in to 2,700 houses in I. Since the 20 years of the census between 2001 and 2021, it's increased, the resident numbers increased from 1,600 to 5,400 residents. We've currently got a site for 265 houses, which I've been to you about. So that's going to bring in another 728 residents. These new sites bring in another 135. 10 at the Blue Boar, 100 at Northern Farm, Crowland Road, and another 25 infill at Craythorne. So when you include those as well, another 370 residents, I residents will have increased from 1,600 20 years ago, 24 years ago now, to 6,500 residents. So what I'm saying here today is the Blue Boar should be 6 or 8 in keeping with the grade 2 building and the conservation area. The 100 in Crowland Road needs looking at sensitively. The other big issue, which I came to you before, and I came before the last local plan, is the school is full. The school is absolutely full and cannot take any more people. Now, there are reasons why it's been delayed, i.e. the Ivory Road development, but there should be something in this plan that says I needs to have an upgrade to its school for a new form entry. The doctors is full. The doctors haven't got enough space. The midwives go down to the school to the side building in the school. So there needs to be something in this plan from the medical people who are in charge of these sort of things, that the doctors is relocated. That site next to the Blue Ball, that could be an ideal doctor's surgery area. The expansion opportunities in our village is reducing and reducing and reducing as these infills happen. And therefore we'll end up with a surgery way out in the fens somewhere where the residents of Newborough and I would have to drive to. So with regard to the growth, we're told, oh, you'll get the infrastructure, just have the houses first, then we can do it. It ain't happened. The doctors hasn't been improved in terms of its size. I know about doctors' issues, but if you haven't got the size and the car park, how can you grow to fulfil this growth in the village? And the school hasn't increased either. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKean. Any questions at all? No, I think you've obviously represented yourself very well there. Oh, sorry, I've got Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Chair. Afternoon, Chair. My question in particular, obviously, being trying not to look at this from a ward councillor point of view, but as a whole plan for the entirety of the city. We've got a lot of rural areas, as you heard from the gentleman before you. We've got a lot of rural areas that are taking some of the strain. Very eloquently put across there the amount of growth that's taken place within that village. The 100 houses up for Crellon Road, for example, are they currently within the village envelope, and what's currently situated there, is that currently land that's unused within that village, or would you say that that's obviously expanding the current village, its envelope, and that's within it?
That land is outside of the current village envelope. You were talking about flood zones earlier on. The village envelope of I goes like that and goes like that and goes like that. The reason for that is it's surrounded by flood zones. I've just mentioned them for that site off Parnwell Way. I, historically, way back when, is the Bronze Age name, or whatever it was, for the island of I. I is an island and it's surrounded by water, like Whittlesey is, like Thorney is, or whatever. Don't misinterpret I as being, oh, well, it's just to the left of the Eastern Industries. It's actually got flood zones all the way around it. And that's why the shape of I is the shape it is. I'm not saying the 100 is in the flood zone. I'm just saying it needs to be sensitive if it's to grow and to go that way with regard to the Grade 2-star Northern Works.
Okay.
Northern Farm.
Thank you. Councillor Antins.
Thank you for that very thorough, comprehensive report. Can I ask, have you got any professional background qualifications in planning or construction, floodplains, etc., or have you taken that advice prior to presenting today?
So those that you know me, I was a parish councillor for 3 years. I was a city councillor for the ward of I and Thorney for 3 years. I have been through 2 public inquiries, local government public inquiries, for the plan of Peterborough. And over those years, I have learnt, and I've read all of this document, and I'm sure Gemma will back me up. I give her a lot of technical questions, and when I don't know, I ask. So when I looked at flood zones and what should happen in flood zone 2s, or all of those things, I went to this planning policy document and read it. When I looked at the Green Wedge, I read this draft planning document and read it. And it says, for Green Wedge, you don't put industry on it, you don't put housing on it, you can put on infrastructure, and you can actually put SUDs and green play areas for adjoining developments into this Green Wedge, but not stick a massive great industrial unit, which is B2 and B8 again, looking at what I did. B2 is low level, B8 is 15 metres. That site is B2 and B8. So right on Parnwell Way, you could have 15-metre distribution storage.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was looking just at the qualifications and background rather than a specific...
I'm also a consultant planner in IT, or was, but that's another issue. That's a personality of mine.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions at all? Mr. McKay? No. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time. Right. Okay. It'll be questions now to officers, obviously Gemma and our planning officer Phil. Should you wish, I've got some to go, but I don't want to steal the thunder. So, anybody want to go first before I go on this? Or am I going to get to go? There we go. Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Chair. I do sympathise with you. I suspect there'll be a lot of jumping around this document, so I hope this is okay. So I'm just reading through this. I'm looking at page 203, the proposed new allocations. I was just wondering, are these kind of sites, are these already owned by the council, or will they need to be purchased off other, I don't know, developers or companies, etc., before we can then go ahead and develop them? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So most of the sites in this plan have been suggested by various landowners and developers, and they were the people that would develop the sites. So we're reliant on them coming forward with those schemes. So they're the landowner, they're the ones that would develop the site.
Subsequent question, if you'll indulge me, Chair. So the reason I asked that is obviously I'm a councillor in Gunthorpe, and I noticed that the Brookside playing fields are on there. Now, it was my understanding that was owned by a school. I don't know if that's changed or not. Just curious.
Yes, so there are a few sites in here that is council-owned land and things like that. So they have been suggested by the council to us. Yes, so that will be up to the council how that is disposed of and sold and developed, if it makes it into the draft plan.
Okay. All right. Councillor Warren.
With the employment side and the business, have you looked at consulting some outside bodies and looking at how the business community is dynamic and agile in what it's doing, and understanding how the draft plan is going to meet the needs of a future Peterborough business, and using those outside consultants to get a more grasp of making sure we've got the right allocation of sites, the right allocation of size of sites for the future for employment, and understanding the size of businesses that are going to be coming to Peterborough?
Yes, so we have commissioned consultants to carry out what's a housing and economic needs assessment, and that's what that's part of the work was to look at what's the interest is in Peterborough, and you know, part of the council's growth strategy is to attract investment and business into Peterborough and ensure that we have the right kind of land and development available to attract that investment and grow the city.
You got another question?
I was thinking like talking to someone like the Chamber of Commerce and getting them, because they are going to be experts in those kind of fields as what it is. They're going to have a grasp of what is going on in Peterborough, Cambridgeshire, and having that feel. Have we talked to anybody like those organisations? They're going to have a much more bigger grasp of the areas of what we're doing and what needs are going to be for this area for employment.
So part of the economic side of the housing and economic needs assessment did look at that, and there was some workshops and things that were held, and we have worked with the council's economic regeneration team and things like people from Peterborough to look at what the interest is in the city.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the question. Councillor Warren, Councillor Skipstead.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. So LP14 HMOs. So in my ward, in the ward I'm councillor, and it's a huge problem with parking. So does this policy then prevent any HMOs being built in an area where there isn't enough parking? How would that be? I mean, would that be enough to stop that happening? And also, the ones that are already there, I'm assuming they'd be allowed to exist and it wouldn't be retrospective. But would the parking issue be enough to prevent further HMOs being set up? That's my first question.
Sorry, can I just confirm? Sorry, what ward was it that you were?
Alton Longville, but it's the whole of the Development Corporation area suffers massively from lack of parking already. So just wanted to know how that would be managed.
So LP14 is a new policy specifically about houses in multiple occupation, because there hasn't been an increase, and the current local plan has policies about design that can be used by the development management officers, but the purpose of this is to set out more specific requirements to help them in determining those applications, and parking is one of those issues, and that is one of the requirements in there. So if it can be proved that the parking is suitable, then that's one of the criteria that will be assessed with planning applications, and if they can't demonstrate sufficient parking, that would be a reason for refusal of the permission.
And is that for an HMO of any size?
So the certain houses multiple occupation up to, is it 6 dwellings, isn't it? six occupants, you can change planning permission you can change use to those, apart from in the areas where there's an Article 4 direction. So where there's certain areas in the city, Wetton, Woodston and Hampton, where that right has been removed, but other areas of more than 6, that's when you have to apply for planning permission.
Sorry, I thought that was going to change for the smaller HMOs.
It's only in the areas that are defined as in the Article 4 directions, those areas.
Really? That's
yes.
not what I understood when I was at a local plan meeting. So it'll carry on the same as it is now then?
For sites that are under 6 dwellings, isn't it? You don't
Really?
Yeah, sorry, I just want to confirm that.
Yeah, just to clarify, that there are certain areas of the city which have what's called an Article 4 direction, which means that under normal circumstances you can change a dwelling to an up to 6 bedroom HMO without needing planning permission. So these areas that are designated as Article 4 directions, that permitted development right is taken away, meaning that planning permission, you have to apply for planning permission. But there are only limited areas of the city where that applies at the moment.
But I thought that was changing with this new draft local plan.
So there's 2 separate issues here. One, the local plan's all about policy. If something needs planning permission, you have to assess it against the local plan. Whereas an Article 4 direction is something different. It's something that determines whether or not planning permission is required in the first place. So they're 2 separate things.
Councillor Rush.
Thank you, Chair. Talk about employment land. In the document here, we've got about different areas of employment land, and it says that only planning permission will only be granted if appropriate solutions are demonstrated and proved to be deliverable. Shouldn't appropriate conditions, development conditions, be made that land can be built on before it's put in the document?
Sorry, I'm not sure if I couldn't have understood. Sorry, what was the question? Sorry.
Do you want to clarify?
If you got an piece of employment land, and you don't know whether it be deliverable because of certain conditions that have got to be made to allow it to be conditions, shouldn't it be in the document now, or should those conditions be sorted before it's put in the document?
Okay, so some sites, when the planning application comes forward, there's other criteria in the plan, so it's allocated. There'll be other criteria in the plan that will have to be considered, and when the planning application is being determined, that's what the conditions to address any of those issues will be put on the planning application. In terms of allocating the site in the document, there's a number of sites where there's issues and things that need to be addressed, and we want them to be addressed up front as part of a planning application. There is a specific site-specific policy that does set out what is required to make sure that site can be delivered. So there's a few examples for housing some of them in the urban, some in the city centre, some of the urban extensions, and the strategic employment site.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Rush.
When you're looking at the local plan, does consideration come into it about facilities for health facilities for hospitals and doctors, or isn't that part of the local plan?
So as part of the site assessment process, we do look to see, what the local facilities are when we're looking whether the site is suitable and sustainable for development. And we have spoken to the public health team, and they will be consulted on the draft plan. And I suppose in the other way is by having this plan and identifying where the future growth is going to be, that enables infrastructure providers such as the health facilities, healthcare, to know where development is going to happen, so they can ensure they have the right services when the growth is delivered. So it works both ways, I think, to work together.
It's just that with the amount of houses that's going to be built, I just mentioned the local hospital, it's always under pressure now. There's nothing in the document to say how this will be dealt with in the future. And if we're building on all this land that's available, there's going to be nowhere left to build any NHS facilities. So I just wondered, you know, there's nothing in this document to say what conversations have gone on with the natural, whatever we want to call it, the health services and that, to where and if they want to build any future hospital facilities.
And yeah, and I think that we have had some discussions in developing and looking at the options, but as part of the consultation, we would expect comments to come back from NHS on those services. And as I said again, it sort of all feeds into a wider infrastructure plan to help deliver the growth of the city.
Yes, Councillor Ray.
Thank you. This question is one that's been raised by a resident of the Barnet ward. They got in touch with Deputy Mayor, who's then passed it on to myself, but it was also raised by Mr. Chilcott in terms of, obviously we put out a call for spaces, we put out a call for different allocations, whether it be for employment or housing, whether it be for local green space, whether it be for a whole number of different things. But they've all been assessed, and I thank you for sort of explaining that assessment criteria and what you go through to identify which spaces should and shouldn't be included. But it very much seems we've got a plan here, we've got this draft that's being presented to us. We've not necessarily got the list of other spaces, why they've not been included, why it's been felt that actually that element of public consultation we're not going to include and we're not going to take on their thoughts. Could you just give a bit of background as to why certain things like some of the local green space allocations haven't been included, some of the other plans? I appreciate there is a process, but for us to sort of review that, it's useful to be able to see those and go, actually, we disagree with that decision or we do agree with this one.
No, thank you for your question on that. So, as I said, there's lots of different things were suggested to us. So we've got settlement boundary changes, village envelopes, not just local green spaces and not just the sites. They've all been assessed against different assessment criteria. So, for example, local green spaces, there's actually criteria set out in national policy that has to be met. So a report has been prepared that assesses all the different sites. The preferred sites have been shown on the draft policies map, and also local green spaces that are not designated by the council in the local plan, but via made neighbourhood plans. So they've been included and shown in that way as well. If a site isn't shown on the map, it hasn't met the assessment criteria. When the local plan goes out for consultation, all these evidence-based documents will be presented as part of the consultation, so people will be able to see the justification and why it hasn't met that criteria. And that can be used to inform their response and questions. And if there's any disagreement with that criteria, then that can be formed part of the response to the comments, and we can take that into consideration when we're preparing the next version. And if further local green spaces want to be suggested, there's an opportunity there as well. But the methodology was set out before we carried out the consultation last year, so people know what the criteria was when they were suggesting sites as well.
Thank you. I think, yeah, on that, we're at the point where it's going to go to public consultation pretty much before we've had sight of some of those things. And to turn around and go, you know, trust us, there's an assessment that's been done, we've looked into it, just go with it, kind of thing, is something that for us as elected representatives is very hard to do. I appreciate the amount of reading that we would probably have to do if you did include all of those documents, but ultimately that's the job, that's the role. But yeah, it just seems like lots of decisions have been taken, and I appreciate they're not easy ones, the amount of work that that the various teams put in. But yeah, to have sight of those sort of things prior to it being made public, or at least in these meetings before we adopted it as our draft plan, would be useful, or would have been useful, I suppose.
Okay. Councillor Gibson, I'm going to go to others because you've had one. I'll come round to you again. You've had one question. Councillor Antunes, just going round and round so we don't take the whole. We'll come back to you.
Thank you, Chair. This is an enormous amount of work and presentation, and the time we have here, I've made something like 6 pages of notes of questions. I don't have time to ask them, and that's perhaps one of the issues here in terms of the quantum that we're looking at and to comment on. I don't think that there's a sufficient time to sort of do that, but I'm not going to go into that. There's some principles here I just wanted to get some clarity on. In terms of the National Planning Policy Framework, for housing supply. The recommendations which have been reduced from 14% to 7% extra, is that a ceiling? Is that a maximum that we're aiming to achieve, or a recommended, or a minimum?
No, national policy, it's a minimum requirement. So it's a mandatory target set by government, and it's a minimum requirement.
So that means we could potentially see significantly more than that if demand is there.
I wouldn't say significantly more, but it is, the local plan is identifying to meet that target. And as was mentioned earlier, there is an inclusion of a buffer, because it allows to ensure that the plan is deliverable and we can meet our targets. It has to take account of sites maybe not coming forward, and that's why there's an additional buffer as well. But that's part of what we're planning, to ensure that we can meet that minimum target and prove we've got deliverable sites to that minimum target.
Sorry, I've got 3 questions to ask, Chair. Sorry, apologies. Yeah, the
3 more, or that's your third question?
2 more, including that one.
Do one, and I'm going to move around and come back to you, if that's all right. Unless
yes,
they're
that's
related.
fine.
Yeah, go on, do your next one.
Sorry, Chair. Yes, thanks. The time frame, with the anticipated process of devolution in the pipeline, which is looking potentially at 2028, and as it were, the region may change its demographic and boundaries. Has that been taken into account in assembling this local plan?
Well, nothing's known about what's going to happen with those boundary changes at this stage. So, and the advice from government is they want to see local plans in place to allow for growth. So, the process is to continue with the local plan for Peterborough.
Forgive me, Chair, I just want a clarification. Have we consulted with, for instance, Huntingdon, which is on the border, which may come into our patch under the devolution process?
Oh yes, that's part of the statutory requirement in preparing the plan. We have to consult with all adjoining authorities and other statutory bodies. And so we have had discussions with Huntingdon District Council, and they will be specifically consulted on the plan to talk about any cross-boundary issues.
Councillor Skipstead.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I have just quite a specific question. 9.9 in the policies section, it mentions that which district centres are being prioritised, and it mentions that Alton has undergone regeneration and redevelopment. I'm not sure when that was, because it was built in the 70s, same time as Bretton, and I don't know what they're referring to when they say regeneration and redevelopment. Can you explain that a bit more?
I think it probably was a few years ago, but since that some of the district centres had like reconfiguration of some of the shops over the years, and other areas haven't had that, Warrington, for example. So I think that's what that's referring to.
Okay, good. I'll pop one in now, this question. I'm going to just have a little bit of preamble. So you went to call for sites, effectively. Developers, councillors, members of the public would have put in areas that they thought could be, landowners, whatever. But also you would have had information, as Councillor Ray said, from people that wanted to safeguard or nominate certain areas for certain things, like whatever that would be, green space, open space, woodland, whatever. I can't see in that document so far, the draft, some of those areas that were nominated that I know of, and I know there'll be others, and I'm sure that's where Councillor Ray's come from. There's no explanation why they're not in there anymore. Those areas that they thought worthy of saving, or nominating, or designating as open space, whatever, there's no notification in there where they are and why they're not in there now.
Okay.
You see what I mean?
Yeah. So if there's the existing local green spaces and areas shown on the policies map, and the new areas that we've assessed and proposed are shown on the draft policies map. If they're not shown on the policies map, that's because they've not met the criteria, the assessment criteria.
Right. So I will have to follow that because it's a linked question.
Yeah.
Is that when it doesn't meet the criteria, is that an officer decision? Because what I'm trying to get to on this is, where does the working group fit into this? As to who makes that decision of, I know you said there's criteria, but there could be an unbalanced one like we do have in planning. So where does it stop? Do we, as Councillor Ray quite said, do we just say, well, officers have decided this? Or does it have to go somewhere for somebody to write the working group to make a decision, to make an informed decision.
So in terms of specifically for local green spaces, that is officers have reviewed those sites and made those recommendations, and that's what's gone forward into this draft plan, which is then going out for consultation. Right. So that's where people have the opportunity to make those comments. For site allocation work, there's a bit more involved in the background and discussing of options and things, but for the local green spaces, it's an officer's recommendation at this stage.
Right, and where does the working group fit into this? I just want to, you've
yes.
got a working group set up, but I never see any reports. I don't see what's coming.
Yeah. So the local plan of working group is there to discuss the various options, and I'm just trying to think. I think we just talked through what the assessment criteria was and what the sites were. But I don't know whether I can't remember whether we actually have to go back to the minutes. What actually was discussed in terms of local green spaces?
Yeah, because that sounds like somebody's making a decision. Like the working group are deciding what fits, what criteria you can work to.
Yeah.
But I don't see where that is. I don't see anywhere where the working group said, well, we've had a discussion with officers, this is the criteria, what makes this acceptable or not acceptable, so we're going with that. But it's almost like the justification of the draft. The draft is there. I know most of that is put forward by the people. It's not put forward by officers. But there's a decision being made as to what stays in the draft and what goes. I'm just trying to get my head around for anybody in this room and in the future. How's that decision been made? Because I would have a different opinion to you, and we'd all have different opinions, especially in the wards. Mm-hmm. But what makes one person right and everybody else incorrect? It doesn't seem very democratic until we get to this point where we say, that's it, take it or leave it, go and talk about that. Well, what about that one over there? Well, no, that didn't make it. And I'm just trying to get my head around, why didn't that make it then?
So the local plan member working group doesn't have any decision-making powers, so they're there to just look at the options and make recommendations, but they have no decision-making powers. And I suppose it's for us as officers to look at all the information, make our professional judgment and as a team and decisions, and then recommend that to then go out for public consultation. So that's where I suppose this stage is of where people can see that. And when the plan is ready for public consultation, there will be the evidence base that will support that background and that decision making.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Councillor Antunes, your agenda. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Another general observation, and I could make a number of specific references to it, and I'll take you perhaps to one of them, 2.15 on page 43. This says, this is again the key issues. So this is similar to the vision and objectives identified to the issues and options document consulted on in summer 2023. Now, that sort of general comment is I've found throughout the document. Rather than saying it's similar, I think it would be very useful to see what the differences are and to set those out. So if it was set out in 2023 as a datum, what has changed? Similar could be 51% same, it could be 1% difference. That leads on to my sort of second point, which is about clear KPIs and outcomes. And again, I'll make reference to item 2.22, opportunity areas. We define that these are critical for inward investment and prosperity, and we're investing many millions of pounds into those. Well, prosperity is again a very nebulous term. What are the KPIs and defining criteria that we can determine success has been achieved with that investment? Surely there should be very clear outcomes and outputs that we can then measure our potential success against. I'll wrap up there just by making quick reference to something you're probably aware of, which is the Peterborough Effect. Now, again, that's a wonderful book, and read through that, and the forecasts and planning that was done in that give very clear forecasts to a future city, and they worked very well to achieve that. So again, I'm looking at this sort of plan as being similar to that, and what I'm finding looking through this, and I'll go back to recap on my point, they seem a little bit woolly in terms of the KPIs and outcomes and objectives, and it would be better, I feel, better for us and any document that gets approved to be critically precise. Thank you.
No, thank you for the feedback on that, and that's something that can perhaps be reported back to Cabinet, and again people can make those comments. I think these you're referring to the just checking I'm looking at the right bit. Is it the objectives? Was it in that section 4? Which I wasn't making out what section you were talking about. Sorry, when you said about the prosperity and were they the objectives? Section 4.
Sorry, I apologise. I didn't quite catch that. Sorry.
So I was just clarifying what section you were referring to.
On page 43, item 2.15 was the first one, where it said this is similar to the visions or vision and objectives. That's on the cover report. So again, what are the differences rather than similar? Could we actually define what the changes are?
Yes, I think because this is the draft and it's talking about when it's the version that's going up for consultation, it won't include that sort of language because that will be the vision. And this is just because it's the consultation version. I was asking what you said about the clear objectives and KPIs. I was just checking, was that the objective set out in section 4 you're referring to, please? I wasn't sure.
Apologies again. I made reference. I think it was to 2 point. Apologies. I've just changed my page over. It was on. So, 2.22, opportunity areas. So that's defining what they are and what their outcome, or why they are such.
I couldn't see that reference in the draft plan.
So
sorry.
It identifies a number of opportunity areas for wider and comprehensive redevelopment, bringing in investment and prosperity to the city. It's just asking, how do we define that? Yeah.
Cabinet report rather than in the draft local plan. I think I'm looking in the wrong place. I understand now. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Councillor Mahmood.
Thank you, Chair, through you. And I just had a question with regards to policy. Like, so, for example, once you publish the draft local plan, when it goes through whatever it goes through, and just say that there's a certain policy and there's a lot of contentions around that policy by the public. Who makes that decision with regards to whether you take that policy forward or you drop that policy? And what sort of criteria is that? And just for clarity, I sit on the working group, so I know the work that you've done. So yeah, thank you for that.
So yes, that's a good sort of question to understand that sort of part of the process. So all the comments will come in, they'll be reviewed and looked at what perhaps changes are necessary, and they'll go through and discuss, and the changes perhaps will be discussed with the local plan member working group to look at what the options are. But it'll be officers that will make recommendations to change the policies. That will go to, for the next version of the plan, that will go to Cabinet for approval, and Cabinet won't approve. Cabinet will recommend approval to full council, and then it'll be up to full council to sign that off as the submission version. So it's an officer recommendation, and then the councillors to decide.
Mr. Chilcott mentioned 3 specific documents that the draft refers to as feeding in, but they're not actually been produced. I just wondered what you can tell me about that, because how did you get to this point if you haven't had those? Just interesting.
So all the evidence base and all the assessment of sites is all fed into what's into the draft version of the plan. These documents, as I said, will be published as part of the consultation, so people will have that opportunity to review those. The documents haven't been published at this early stage because it is the draft is being approved for public consultation. And this is the same process as the previous local plans, last 2 or 3 times at this draft stage. That's the same process. But all the information has all the evidence is there. It's all been assessed and will be made public as part of the consultation.
Something that's been contentious over the last few years is the suggestion that the football stadium should be moved to the embankment. But what I can see on page 121 on the embankment, they're saying the council wishes to retain the open character of this area and will resist proposals for built development. Does that mean that is now out of the question on this site?
So the draft plan is proposing to, as the current plan does, protect the embankment area for open space recreation, and to allow limited development along river frontage if that's more for recreation use and to recreation and leisure.
Yes, Councillor. No, I'm not. I'm just thinking Councillor said, yeah, subject to committee's decision.
Thank you, Chair.
It's a local plan, remember, yeah.
Apologies. The final question I have is, we mentioned earlier about the housing being a minimum standard, and building regulations and affordable homes, etc., all tend to be minimum standards, and developers will build to those minimum standards. So do we have a vision and a proposal to set a stretch standard, an exceptional standard for developers, for instance, in energy conservation for the future city, so solar heating, rainwater harvesting, beyond the minimum that would effectively impact land values potentially, therefore not attractive to the landowner. And also looking at that in terms of what I would term future city. We've been termed environment capital and various things over the years, but future city now seems to be in a broader spectrum, so it takes into account environment, transport, lifestyle, etc. Should we not be aiming at an exemplar? Should we not be setting the bar very high for ourselves and seeing how far we can get to achieve that? And reading the report, I'm not sure it sets that. Thank you.
No, I think thank you. You raised some really important points there. That yes, the local plan that is looking to the future for 20 years ahead, and want to ensure that the future growth is the most sustainable that it can be and meets these standards for energy use, energy efficiency particularly. That currently the building regulations and national policy are quite clear that there's the minimum of building regulations, and it's very difficult for a local plan to set much higher standards. And that's something that the government is consulting on, those future home standards, so things may change. But for the council to set really much higher standards, that would be challenged at the examination to the inspector, and we'd have to justify why. One of the first things would be viability. We've carried out viability assessments and looked at different options, and that would involve going to that level would involve reducing the amount of affordable housing. So I suppose it's kind of a balance of what we're looking to do. But as national policy changes or building regulations change and there's more to meet the climate ambitions, then hopefully that will be. But the current plan pushes things as far as we can within the current regulations.
Sorry, any further questions at all? Yes, Councillor Mahmood.
Yeah, final one from me, Chair. Just on page 71. Regarding the adult gaming centres. So I cite here that it talks about change of use in town centre locations. As we know that Peterborough, I feel anyway, we've got a high proportion from my perspective of adult gaming centres within the city centre. I'm just thinking that is there anything that we're within this plan that looks on the outer skirts or further away from the town centre with regards to giving this committee further scrutiny to look at these applications, and especially with regards to cumulative impact of these gaming centres, because it will have one. So I'm just seeing whether we've had that consideration.
Thank you. I think that's a very important point again to raise, and why this policy has been updated to take account of that and the increase in those sort of uses. So in the policy where it refers to town centres, it means town centres refers to the hierarchy of centres. So that does include district and local centres as well. So it's anywhere defined for retail use. And yes, that's definitely something that could be looked at in terms of the cumulative impact in terms of future planning applications as well.
Okay, I think most of those comments would have been taken by Democratic Services and yourself, Gemma, because that's what we're being asked to do. We're not being asked to approve anything. We're not being asked to put any recommendations forward. It's all about comments, which obviously some of those will be recommendations, as you'll have noted already. So unless there's any other comments on this, The committee is recommended to comment, as we have done, on the draft local plan before it is submitted to Cabinet on the 20th of March for approval for the purpose of public consultation starting in April 2025. It says May as well, but I guess it is April, you said, didn't you? When did you say consultation? Yeah, 11th of April. Anybody else wish to debate at this point on this? We've had all the comments. Is there any particular debate you want to put into this, or are you happy now you've had that chance? It's fairly big. I mean, it's not really, I don't know what we could debate really between us, but it's there. The option is still in there as a standing item if you want to debate anything.
Just a quick one from. I just wanted to note officers' work around this. I sit on the local plan working group, and I know firsthand the sort of work the officers have done. So I want to just thank them for the work that they put into, because I know it's not easy, especially when it comes to identifying sites.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think I echo that on behalf of all the group. Thank you for the amount of work. The report is certainly really good. Whether we agree with certain aspects, that's part of the consultation, so that's fair enough. But it is very detailed, and we look forward to the next round. But as I said, I would like to see, and I hope everybody agrees, that justification for things going in and out are clearer in the next stage to make sure they are. So if there's no further debate, I need a proposer and a seconder that this moves to Cabinet to push it to consultation. Anybody wish to propose it?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I propose that we move a note to this report.
Okay, seconder? Councillor Antunes? Yeah. Can you just say, can you announce it, please? Can you announce it? You second?
Sorry, yes, I second proposal. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. There is no vote needed if we're all agreed. Is there any dissent? No, then that is agreed. All right, thank you. Thank you very much, committee. That brings this meeting to a close. Thank you to everybody for all your input. Thank you, officers. Thank you to my Democratic Services buddy. Thank you, Gemma. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for sitting there and being so patient. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next time. So.